Yo everybody, what's going on? This is Keegan from Kman Reviews. If you enjoyed this review, make sure you hit that like and the subscribe button. And if you have any opinions at all that you would like to share, make sure to leave them down in the comment section. Lana Del Rey, Blue Banisters. Lana Del Rey is an American singer, songwriter, icon at this point, honestly, and now an established veteran of my channel. This is the fourth time I've given her music some attention on my channel, following up Lust for Life, Norman fucking Rockwell, and Chemtrails Over the Country Club. All of those reviews will be linked in the corner if you're curious to check them out. But now, just a mere 7 months after Chemtrails, we get the follow-up, Blue Banisters, an album that I had a lot of hype going into. I've read a few reviews of Chemtrails that said some people didn't really care for that album because of Jack Antonoff, who had a pretty significant role in the crafting of that album, so I saw many people were delighted to see that this album, for the most part, seems to be a one-woman show. It seems to be very personal, very vulnerable, no features either, and also a few cuts here that date way back to like 2013, an era notoriously cherished by her fans, so I built up a decent amount of expectations for this album. But were they matched? Let's find out as I review this album track by track. We will start with the singles, with there being 4 of them. The first being the title track Blue Banisters, which on an instrumental level is pretty typical, but typical in this case is really good. The piano is so soft, so rich, it lights up with each note played alongside some windy ambience. It's the only thing we get for the entire runtime, yet the song doesn't feel thin, and that's one aspect of Lana's music I've always enjoyed. Speaking of that, her vocals. My god, I love the way she sings over this. It's much less melodic and feathery, especially for the first 2 verses, where it's more akin to a monologue or reading some poetry. She also utilizes a lot more power in her singing, soaring much higher than what I've heard from her in a long time, as she sings these lyrics that really seem to be about change and trying to cope with the loss of a relationship, how this guy promised so much to her. The Banisters in this song seem to represent her and her emotional temperament, and how her friends often have to come by and help her through it, or paint her banisters a different color. But no matter how hard or how often they may try, there's always something that brings back the lingering emptiness. This is a gorgeous song. The second single and album opener, Textbook, is just a gratifying opener. I adore this song so much. I love how it opens up as a very intimate track. The lone grumbly bass that kicks the song off instantly gives me this picture of a monochromatic stage with Lana performing for an empty audience, as the guitar and chimes reverberate in the background, adding a delicate serenity to this scene. Outside of the verses, the chorus picks things up with a soft indie rock beat, a steady sandy drum, and it continues that cycle between the 2 tonally different styles for the song as the outro gracefully finishes it with rolling waves and an army of foggy harmonizers to let the ethereal vibe set in before just closing it off. Lana's vocals change appropriately for the song, but much less soliloquized than on Blue Banisters. It does feel very intimate and confrontational, as the lyrics seem to recall her first love and her attempt to remake the love her parents had since it worked so well for them, but now after that didn't work, she's discovered herself and loves superficiality. Another great song. The third single, Wildflower Wildlife, isn't too much different from the title track, especially for the opening as the song kicks off with the same somber piano melody, although not nearly as sparse. There's a few extra keys that give the piano a bit more volume, as Lana's vocals have that signature Lana tone that's been present on countless songs of hers. It's almost her trademark singing voice at this point, but damn it, it's still a captivating performance nonetheless. Instead of following a cycle, the track gradually builds up throughout its runtime, initially in Lana's voice gaining a bit more depth, and the little nuances in the second chorus before it finally climaxes with a pounding, pixelated percussion as the track fades out just as softly as it began. Lyrically, she uses a lot of nature symbolism to paint this image of not wanting to become a destructive person in this relationship like so many were to her, expressing in many ways how she will be nurturing and compassionate when need be, but also independent and free if things go haywire. Great track. And the fourth and final single, Arcadia, which honestly might just be one of the most beautiful songs I've heard from her. I absolutely adore this instrumental. The piano has a much more classical influence than a lot of the piano work she's done. Plus, not to mention the strings that only aid in this soothing vibe. Both instruments dance beautifully in this moonlit serenade as Lana's vocals are slightly higher pitched than her norm, but my god, they just work so well, especially when she soars on the chorus. It just feels so angelic and never gets old no matter how many times it comes through. Lyrically, it's actually pretty straightforward. She's singing about how this city of Arcadia is so dear to her. She's leaving her current town and heading to Arcadia. That's where her heart truly is. Amazing singles run. Let's see how the rest of the album compares. Now for the rest of the tracks. Interlude the Trio is just a 1 minute and 16-second instrumental interlude, which is actually like a trap banger of a beat. It has this dark, grimy bass, skittering trap drum, and these trumpets that are actually interpolated from The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. It kind of gives me like this Harlem trap beat vibe, something any of the ASAP Mob would have absolutely killed on. Would love to hear someone freestyle over this also. Black Bathing Suit opens up in an ominous manner with the cawing of a crow, and of course a simple piano and the microscopic hissing of a cymbal that you just know is going to build up, and it does, becoming a fitting partner to the piano, with its rhythm that doesn't really stand out, but it's just noticeable enough to adhere with a steady beat. The percussion vanishes after the chorus and continues the pattern throughout the song as Lana's vocals have a powerful tone with an appropriately haunting effect to them until the outro where Lana's vocals go full psycho with some occasionally pitchy moments and some manic laughter. It's a really engaging song. If You Lie Down With Me is another pretty good song here, but in my opinion, this one's not anything too remarkable for the track list. Not saying it's bad, quite the opposite actually. It opens with the same melancholic piano playing, but I do like Lana's vocals, which feel extra echoey, like this was recorded a few meters away in a dark cave. The chorus introduces the faint percussion that blends in well with the ethereal instrumental. The biggest takeaway from this track, for me at least, was the gorgeous, deep, and showy brass section that finishes the song. It feels luxurious at such a moody and slower tempo, as these lyrics try to paint this picture of Lana in a happy relationship, but there are plenty of foreboding lyrics that seem to indicate otherwise. Still, it's a good track. Beautiful is, as the title would suggest, a beautiful song. However, there are particular things that keep me from loving this track as much as the others. The main piano is gorgeous as always, it's deep, rich, and pensive as it often tends to be, but what throws me off are these extra high-pitched piano keys that sound like a toy or a children's piano. Thankfully, they don't mess up the entire song and even provide some nice embellishments in certain sections, but when the playing starts to feel more like fingers just stumbling across the keys, it creates this clunky, inharmonious melody that just does not sit right with me. Other than that, though, Lana's vocals are still very good, delicate, and peaceful, as she sings these lyrics about this relationship and how she doesn't have to conform to what this partner wants. She can be her own person and is happy to do so. Not a bad song here, but in terms of the overall track list, it is probably my least favorite. Violets for Roses gives me pretty similar vibes to Arcadia, especially in its instrumentation. While the piano is a little bit more standard, the string work makes it feel so much more alive and powerful than it would have been otherwise. Other than that, though, this one doesn't really leave too much of a lasting impression instrumentally in the full album context, but what does is this amazing vocal melody, especially for the chorus. It has a breezy, wistful feeling to it with Lana's careful, airy vocals, singing these lyrics about this partner of hers getting between her and her goals, which, yeah, she's not too happy with that. Really nice song here. Dealer, which has an uncredited feature from Miles Kane, is a track I've seen everyone herald as the highlight of this album. And I totally understand why, because I'm in the same boat. And I think a key factor as to why it's being so loved is that it sounds different from the rest of the album. I haven't been bringing this up in my review that much, but this album as one full experience is a very samey listen. It's consistent, and consistently good for that matter, but it doesn't fuck with the formula too much like NFR or even Chemtrails did. Anyway, I'll dive more into that on my overall thoughts, but this track is easily one of the highlights. I love the gloomy pacing of this beat, the slapping percussion, and the little taps of the bass, and the moody ambience in the keys. Miles' vocals have a bit of a nasally grit to them, but he does work well over the beat as Lana unleashes this yell that came as a massive surprise to me and really punches through the beat. Yeah, one of the best here, no doubt. Thunder is another pretty great track here. Most notably, the violin has a more noticeable presence with its creaky fluttering, with the earnest piano playing and a slow yet very clean percussion. It's one of the more pure, vibey tracks on the album, especially as Lana seems to break free of the melancholia in her voice for the most part, and sings in a more carefree tone. It really feels like a happy song, which is another breath of fresh air. Lyrically, the track couldn't be further from that tone, however, about this problematic relationship with this guy being a very calamitous figure, kind of unpredictable and explosive, and she's just expecting him to disappoint her in the end. Great track. Nectar of the Gods is yet another appealing change-up, where nearly all of the tracks prior were centered around a piano. This one favors the acoustic guitar, and its simple, twangy plucks actually do really well with Lana's tougher vocals. Really feels like it could have fit well on Chemtrails Over the Country Club, which, if you saw that review, you'll know I really like that album, so to hear this style is naturally going to click well with me. Aside from that, it doesn't do much else aside from amping up for the chorus, but not by an aggressive amount. It's really just a pleasant acoustic song. Pretty good. Living Legend feels like a very moving song. The guitar and especially the piano hold so much density and burden that just attacks the soul in a way that no other song on this album did. And that feeling's only heightened when taking Lana's vocals into account, as she delivers one of the most emotive performances on the entire album. This is actually one of the oldest cuts off this album, being written around 8 years ago, as the lyrics talk about this lifelong friend of Lana's that impacted her in so many different ways, which she apparently heard, so that's really cool. Honestly, this one's another highlight for me. Cherry Blossom is a pretty sweet song. The piano is about the same, but it does have some nice higher notes to balance out the richness of the lower ones, and thankfully it's not as stark a contrast as Beautiful was. Lana's vocals, though, are very beautiful. Her falsetto is so well executed on this one, it feels very dignified and opulent. It's also the shortest full-length song on this album at 3 minutes and 17 seconds, and as much as I do like this style, I think the duration is perfect to leave a good impact on the tracklist. Lyrically, it's probably the most touching on the entire album, basically just an ode to her future daughter. Very nice track. And finally, the closer, Sweet Carolina, is an appropriately relaxed song to finish off the album, and much more so than the majority of the tracklist. Yet again, we have just a piano at the helm. This one, yet again, is very heavy as Lana's vocals take center stage, and as always, she does an amazing job. Very commanding yet vulnerable delivery, and the falsettos are definitely top tier. Lyrically, the track is about her sister, who recently gave birth, which this song is meant to be a calming light in the potential depressive state she might get in when raising this child. Pretty solid finish to the album. Overall, this was admittedly a good album. There's a lot of things to like about it. The percussion is very well handled, soulful, emotional. There isn't much to critique with these songs on an individual level. However, in terms of a full-length album is where this really falters. As I mentioned when talking about Dealer, so many of the tracks here kind of just sound the same, and when it comes to one continuous listen of 1 hour, where 11 out of the 15 tracks are over 4 minutes long, some of the songs are going to fall short and just not really stick that much, and that does unfortunately happen with the back half of this album, which is such a shame because that's where I think a lot of the powerhouse songs are. What I'm trying to get at is, this is good, remarkably good in fact, but I think if there were a few more songs here in the style of Dealer or Nectar of the Gods, it could have really elevated this to a great album. As it stands, I'm going to say Chemtrails was the better album from 2021. It was more concise, had a bit more variety sprinkled throughout. I will still keep a fair share of tracks from this album, but I likely won't return to the full thing for a while. But still, I'm feeling a 7 out of 10 on this album. Well guys, hope you enjoyed that review. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.